your credit score.
Over 500,000 customers have experienced the convenience of a loan through Avant. No wonder Avant has an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. And now, Avant will give you a $50 Amazon.com gift card after your first payment is made on time. To check your rates and to get this special radio offer, go to Avant.com today and enter promo code 5252 when applying. That's AVANT.com, promo code 5252. Go to Avant.com today and enter promo code 5252.
Computer, execute 12.4p operation.
Optimizing algorithm. Running encryption packet alpha 990. Oh, I don't feel so good.
What is it, computer?
Is it hot in here? It feels hot in here. I feel a little clammy. I should lie down or something.
A computer with a virus? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
Those oysters Rockefeller were a mistake.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Welcome back to my podcast. This is Richard Painter. This is a very dangerous situation. Once again, we need to think seriously about the War Powers Act and whether the President of the United States has too much power to get this country into a war through acts of aggression or injudicious responses to various incidents abroad. And it's not, as I said, not that this is without provocation, but this president is not someone who is fit to respond to the crises around the world, particularly military crises, in this situation where he's being impeached potentially, and also given his state of mind, which we see every day on Twitter, and his extreme emotional reactions that have led many psychologists and psychiatrists to believe that he is not mentally fit to carry forth with his duties as President of the United States, particularly with respect to the use of nuclear weapons and commanding our armed forces in times of war or times when there's a risk of war. We have heard that President Trump and Rudy Giuliani have been planning to work with the government of the Ukraine to ramp up investigations of Joe Biden's son and potentially of Joe Biden himself. Joe Biden being the front runner at this point in the Democratic primary for President of the United States. We see evidence that they want to do it again, play it again, the same playbook, the same things we saw in 2016. We need a House and Senate that are willing to do their job, investigate, and legislate.
You've been listening to a portion of the Politics Podcast with Richard Painter. To hear more, look for the Politics Podcast with Richard Painter on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts.
Back to the Aggressive Progressive, Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. When you see someone in pain, how do you react? You see a dog in pain, much less a child. How do you react? Is your natural inclination to help that person or to turn the other cheek? Conservatives, it seems to me, put a filter on their compassion. They have compassion, but it's a brown filter. It filters out the brown. They can only see the white. They have compassion for poor, working class people, rural people, because those people vote for Republicans. Because those people vote against immigration. Because those people vote to criminalize abortion. Not, I think, because they really care about those people. And I say that because of the filter. You don't find Democrats who don't care about the white working class. It's Democrats that support unions. It's Democrats that support rehab for opioid. We're not arguing that opioid addicts should be locked up the way Republicans argued for crack addicts. We support rural broadband. We support helping our rural communities. We do care about everyone in need. Conservatives put up the brown filter. They can't see the brown people. And if they do, they see danger. Danger! how is a mother who walks 2,500 miles over the course of several months on blistering feet in inadequate shoes through the desert, carrying 2 little children? Explain to me again how she's a threat to America? You think she's an Al-Qaeda terrorist? Is that what it is? You think she's smuggling drugs in her 7-year-old's backpack that we can check if we just allow her to go through ports of entry? How is she different from your great-grandmother, or your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, or your mother, or you? If you come here from Cuba, given that Cuba is a dictatorship, you simply step on the sea, the beach of Florida, and you're an automatic legal permanent resident. You automatically get Social Security and Medicare, by the way, those of you who oppose that. And then you can run for senator. Right, Ted Cruz? Marco Rubio? Yeah, if you're a child of Cuban immigrants, you got it made. What happened to equal protection under the law? Now, Republicans say, but that would be open borders. No, I don't support open borders. Again, keep out criminals. Keep out people who hate America. You know, if you've given long speeches saying death to America, I don't want you here. How many people are we talking about? Very few. Here's the thing. Compassion aside, as the conservative who wrote me said, compassion aside, immigrants help all of us. They build our economy. They work very, very hard at low-level jobs, and then most of them make it to the middle class and work very, very hard hiring Americans. Immigrants contribute to our culture. In America, you can go to the sauna while listening to jazz and eat at a Chinese restaurant afterwards, and then go and enjoy a Puerto Rican food festival. We are the greatest country on earth, in my opinion, precisely because America is not based on an ethnicity. It's not based on a single religion or language or color. We are based on an ideal, and we're the only country in the world like that. We are the world. Americans come from every country on the planet, and we live together. And while we're divided right now, the people that don't want immigrants were also, almost all of them, descended from immigrants. Many of them are of German and Irish heritage. I'm forgetting, I guess, in the mid-1800s, the German and the Irish were kept out by the English. Catholics were kept out by Protestants. Poor people weren't wanted by rich people, except as indentured servants. But come, we did. And I think we immigrants have done pretty well. From Alexander Hamilton today, we have the strongest economy on earth because of immigrants. Because we transform the tired, poor, huddled masses yearning to be free into productive citizens. We profit from immigrants. We profit culturally, we profit financially, we profit economically, and yeah, our hearts grow a couple sizes as well. When you help an immigrant achieve the American dream, they are grateful for all their lives, and they pay it forwards. Compassion is not just the right thing because it feels good. It's actually profitable. And if conservatives don't have a heart, they should at least care about the money. Donald Trump had a tax cut. 1/3 of the money went out of our country to rich foreigners. They didn't contribute to this country. They didn't do anything for this country. Not like the poor Guatemalan woman walking 2,500 miles with her kids. She might work as a hotel maid, but then her daughter might grow up to be a world-renowned scientist. That's the American dream. And progressives proudly support the American dream. We believe in liberty, justice for all. Open your heart a little, conservatives. See the humanity in people other than yourselves. And you might just find you get to a better place. It's Mark Levine signing off.
Schooling the GOP, one hand tied behind his back, the Constitution in the other. It's Mark Levine.
Hello, I'm Casey Hobbs.
And I'm Shane Mason, and we're the hosts of Nurse Talk Radio.
Here's what we're talking about this week.
Last week, the far-right Mercatus study related to the Koch brothers were released, and this is interesting. The study was done to undermine the growing movement for Medicare for All, but instead illustrated why Medicare for All is the only real solution for an escalating healthcare crisis.
The study was commissioned in part by the Koch brothers because they were wanting to have a lot of great ammo to fight against this terrible moving towards this single-payer stuff. And when you actually did the comparison, yes, the government would end up spending trillions of dollars. We already spend more trillions of dollars doing what we're doing now. So the study actually reinforced the fact that we would save money if we went to Medicare for All. So what's always brilliant about this is when you can get opposition research that reinforces what you've been saying all along.
Fantastic. So Donna the Hill had an article this week, Tax Breaks for Wealthy Paid For with Deep Cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Very scary.
Yeah, this is more of the same, only getting more concerning as we go forward. We had this Trump tax cut for the wealthy. Well, their plan at this point is to take those funds from the social safety net, from Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the food stamps, the things that people really have to rely on when times are difficult for them, and the things that we've all paid into as earned benefits for Medicare and Social Security. So let's protect the social safety net. Let them find the money somewhere else.
Thanks for listening. You can find more information about these topics at nursetalksite.com or nationalnursesunited.org.
This podcast is powered by National Nurses United, the nation's largest union for registered nurses.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Republican Governor Kay Ivey of Alabama on Wednesday signed the bill. The bill which outlaws almost all abortions in the state, including in cases of incest and rape. The law was written to trigger court challenges, which abortion opponents hope will lead a conservative majority on the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade.
You don't control this. You don't own this.
Democratic lawmakers outraged.
You know, there is no law in this country on the books that says what a man can or cannot do with his body.
Bring back, fight back. And abortion rights advocates calling for a nationwide response today. The nation's most restrictive abortion law. All those in favor, Republican men.
Life is precious. Life is a gift of our Creator.
Now you're in my womb. I want you out.
The law effectively bans abortion by making it a felony punishable by up to 99 years or life in prison for performing the procedure. The law does include very limited exceptions, such as serious health risks to the mother. Democrats attempted to add an amendment to exempt victims of rape and incest, but that failed.
She get raped and have to have that child based on an Alabama law, just because we want to legislate morality.
This fight now potentially setting up a Supreme Court showdown.
Our choice.
The ACLU and Planned Parenthood have already said they plan to challenge this in court, which supporters of the law admit is kind of the point.
We'll never get a heartbeat bill to be constitutional until Roe versus Wade is decided and reversed. And so I think everybody understood that.
Alabama is one of 16 states to introduce or pass restrictive abortion legislation, sometimes called heartbeat bills, this year.
Missouri's Republican-led Senate met in Thursday's pre-dawn hours to pass a bill, 2410, that would ban abortions at 8 weeks of gestation. This bill, which still has to pass the state's Republican-led House, calls for prison terms of as much as 15 years for doctors performing abortions after the 8-week cutoff. The bill allows exceptions for medical emergencies, but not for pregnancies born of rape or incest. Kentucky, Mississippi, Ohio, and Georgia also recently approved bans on abortion at the point that a fetal heartbeat is detected, which can occur as early as 6 weeks and sometimes before a woman even knows she's pregnant. The bill in Alabama bans abortion outright with no exceptions for rape or incest, a head-on challenge to 1973's Roe v. Wade decision and to a 1992 U.S. Supreme Court decision in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Senators from both sides of the aisle on Wednesday demanded that the Trump administration explain why it had evacuated U.S. diplomatic missions in Iraq and brief lawmakers on the alleged threats from Iran that prompted the move. Foreign officials have also disputed the Trump administration's Iran threat claims. Major General Chris Jika, a British deputy commander in the global coalition against the Islamic State, told reporters from Baghdad Wednesday, quote, "There's been no increased threat from Iranian-backed forces in Iraq and Syria." CNN has more.
Updated military options for a possible war against Iran include detailed destruction of the regime's massive missile inventory and air defenses before moving to attack nuclear sites. It would take months of buildup and more than 100,000 U.S. troops fighting from the air, land, and sea, according to U.S. officials. That option has been briefed to senior officials, including John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, a longtime Iran hawk. But would President Trump, who wants to reduce overseas troop levels, take the U.S. to war against Iran?
We have not planned for that. Hopefully we're not going to have to plan for that.
The immediate focus, get Iran to back off from what the Pentagon believes is a plan to possibly attack U.S. forces in the region. But so far, the U.S. offering little to no public evidence. Congressional members now having to wait until next week for a briefing from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on the alleged threat.
A new immigration plan gets rolled out Thursday by the White House. It would move the nation toward a merit-based immigration system that would give preference to highly skilled and educated individuals. Immigration based on family ties would be reduced. But the proposal conspicuously avoids a plan for what to do about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, the Obama-era plan that shields undocumented immigrants brought to the United States as children from deportation. It also does nothing to address the 11 million people already in the country illegally. Meantime, the U.S. military is planning to build 6 tent cities near the border to house up to 7,500 migrants. And another child has died in U.S. custody after being detained at that border. The 2-year-old from Guatemala is the 4th known minor to have died in custody after being detained by the Border Patrol since December.
I got good news.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
Hey! It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Newly unsealed court records show that convicted former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn informed Robert Mueller's investigators that people connected to the Trump administration or Congress contacted him multiple times, potentially attempting to obstruct the investigation. Mueller wrote those people could have affected both Flynn's willingness to cooperate and the completeness of that cooperation. Flynn giving Mueller's team a voicemail from President Trump's personal attorney to Flynn's lawyer. He says, if there's information that implicates the president, then we've got a national security issue. We need some kind of heads up. And reminds Flynn's lawyers of Trump's fondness for his now convicted advisor.
I think it's very clear
that this further supports the urgent need of the committee to hear from Mr. Mueller directly, to get the fully unredacted report and all of the supporting materials.
In the Mueller report, he indicates the voicemail could have obstructed the investigation, but he could not determine whether the president was personally involved.
Why not?
Meantime, the White House continues to stonewall efforts by House Democrats to look into possible obstruction. White House counsel Pat Cipollone called the congressional probes an attempt to harass political opponents. In a new letter to Cipollone, House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler says, "Your failure to comprehend the gravity of the special counsel's findings is astounding and dangerous."
The president's posture now is making it impossible to rule out impeachment or anything else. This flies in the face of 200 years of history and would go, if accepted, would go a long way toward making the president, any president, a dictator.
Sweet Jesus. That's where we are. That's where we are right now. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday, you bastards. Happy Friday. Today is the last day before we go on vacation, and I'm almost scared to let this microphone go because, it is possible, I doubt it, that Mueller might actually finish the negotiation that he's in with the Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committee in the House and show up to testify one of these days. And I'm just hoping it's not one of these days that we're gone. But hey, I'm going. I can't wait. I'm going. I'll probably periscope from, our little vacay. I'll show you what's going on, in civilized parts of the world where people actually like each other, where countries aren't being pulled apart by dictators with spray painted, pumpkin-colored skin and freaky teased comb-overs, stuck in place with bedhead, helmet head. That's what he uses. I just bought it. What did I buy? I bought Chi helmet head. Somebody's got to tell me if that'll work on the frizz because, it's very humid. Very humid where I'm going. You know where I'm going. So anyway, there is this story that broke last night. I believe the first place I read it was on the Daily Kos. I think they had it first, but this was in response to a Washington Post request for information, right? That's how this is all coming out now. And what it is that Flynn apparently has voicemails. Flynn apparently has recordings of various, this occurred multiple times according to the sentencing document. Okay, this sentencing document is where all this information is coming from. Mueller says he's ready to sentence Flynn. Okay, and so in the sentencing document, aid to the judge, where he's recommending a very, very light sentence for Flynn because of the ginormous amount of cooperation that Flynn offered, that Flynn pled guilty early, that Flynn was one of the only people that was willing to plead guilty about lying to the FBI, that he did it early, that he did it often, that he kept on, all his meetings, like 19 different ones, that he provided documents and apparently tape-recorded conversations between transition team members, administration officials, and members of Congress. What were we talking about yesterday? What was I telling you yesterday? I played you Comey's town hall answer when he was asked, to comment on the fact that the Trump administration is blaming the Russian interference on the Obama administration. And Comey explains that he and the President of the United States, Barack Obama, not only briefed Congress, but asked Congress to affirmatively communicate in a joint bipartisan statement to the American people what was going on with Russia interference, what was going on with those emails, what was going on with WikiLeaks, what was going on with this Trump campaign. And he said, to the eternal shame, the Republicans said no. They wouldn't tell the American people. And now we're finding out through this sentencing memo for Michael Flynn that is true. That the Republicans knew what was going on as it was going on, what the Russians wanted, that they preferred Donald Trump and that they hated Hillary Clinton, and they would do just about anything to make sure she lost, and that they would campaign affirmatively for Donald Trump in the United States, hack emails, disperse them at critical periods in the campaign. Obviously, the October surprise was the Access Hollywood tape. This was 2 months after Congress was briefed. They saw it. They knew what was going on, and they chose to go along with the cover-up. They chose to go along with the interference. They chose a foreign adversary over the American people. And that is why they're bootlickers now. That is why they're in cahoots. And that is why they support a man who stands for just about everything that they despise. Trade wars. Oh my God, really? So here's Comey's answer once again.
President Trump says, and just very recently blamed the Obama administration, saying they didn't do enough about Russian interference. What should have been done more? Could more have been done? And you were at the FBI at that point.
That's a hard question. President Obama faced a very difficult choice. The number one goal for the Russians is to damage our democracy and undermine faith in our electoral process. If he makes an announcement that the Russians are coming for the election, has he just accomplished their goal for them? And has he given Donald Trump an excuse to say Obama fixed the election? So I get why he struggled with it. He did a very sensible thing. He tried to get the bipartisan leaders of Congress to jointly tell the American people this is going on. And in my view, to their everlasting shame, the Republicans refused.
You offered to write an op-ed, didn't you?
Yep.
And summer, that was warning the American public about Russian interference, and that what was it, the administration said no?
Yeah, I offered it to the administration saying, if you decide to try and inoculate the American people, I'm happy to do it. Here's what I would tell the American people. But I get why President Obama hesitated, and I agreed with his concern about not accomplishing the Russian goal for them.
Sick, huh? So that's what we were talking about yesterday. And then lo and behold, I leave, I go home, and all of a sudden there's breaking news that Flynn actually has tapes, and that the judge in this case, the federal judge in this case, Emmett Sullivan, he's in D.C., he ordered the prosecutors, he ordered Mueller, he ordered the government to provide a public transcript of a November 2017 voicemail involving Michael Flynn. It is a very sensitive call. It is after Michael Flynn pled guilty and decided to cooperate with Mueller, and still the Trump people, the Trump attorney, and we don't know which one it is, calls up Flynn and reminds him that the president is very fond of him and asks him, to give him a heads up if he's going to enter into a government cooperation agreement, because then if he does, we will have a national security issue to deal with. What did he mean by that? He meant that the president could be shown to be a traitor to the United States, and that Flynn ought to keep his trap shut.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandiRhodes.com.
Over the last few months, Herky Jerky has offered some really great specials on bacon and turkey and beef jerky. With a new month upon us, it's a perfect time to include all of their products into the mix, so you could choose from everything in their online store and still save. For the entire month of May, all Herky Jerky orders of $50 or more get an automatic $10 off. You don't need a promo code, and free shipping is included. That means you can choose from bacon, turkey, 4 kinds of beef jerky, buffalo, elk, venison jerky. You can also grab the delicious meat sticks, buffalo, elk, venison, and 3 flavors of beef smokies, mild, jalapeno, and honey. And for those of you who have never tried game meat, I dare you to find a better tasting meat stick than the award-winning venison, and it comes in hot or mild. It's been a bestseller since 1992. The choice is yours this month, and whatever you decide, don't worry, you can't go wrong. All Herky Jerky products, they come fresh to your door. They're mailed the next day using USPS Priority Mail. They make great snacks for you. They're great gifts for family, friends. Don't forget your mom, because your mom would be thrilled. I know I'm thrilled when I get my hands on their delicious, low-fat, high-protein, low-carb products. What a great Mother's Day gift. And as a reminder, yes, you get $10 automatically deducted from your shopping cart when checking out, and you don't need a promo code. And if you want to order by phone, feel free. Call Jason directly at 215-479-6280. 215-479-6280. Or just visit herkyjerky.com. Herky Jerky says thank you for your loyal support for their incredible business, and we thank Herky Jerky for their incredible support of the Randi Rhodes Show. Visit herkyjerky.com now.
Welcome back to my podcast. This is Richard Painter. This is a very dangerous situation. Once again, we need to think seriously about the War Powers Act, or whether the President of the United States has too much power to get this country into a war through acts of aggression or injudicious responses to various incidents abroad. And it's not, as I said, not that this is without provocation, but this president is not someone who is fit to respond to the crises around the world, particularly military crises, in this situation where he's being impeached potentially, and also, given his state of mind, which we see every day on Twitter, and his extreme emotional reactions that have led many psychologists and psychiatrists to believe that he is not mentally fit to carry forth with his duties as President of the United States, particularly with respect to the use of nuclear weapons and commanding our armed forces in times of war or times when there's a risk of war. We have heard that President Trump and Rudy Giuliani have been planning to work with the government of the Ukraine to ramp up investigations of Joe Biden's son and potentially of Joe Biden himself. Joe Biden being the front runner at this point in the Democratic primary for President of the United States. We see evidence that they want to do it again. Play it again, the same playbook, the same things we saw in 2016. We need a House and Senate that are willing to do their job, investigate, and legislate.
You've been listening to a portion of the Politics Podcast with Richard Painter. To hear more, look.
Oh! All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Michael Flynn, once again, the former national security advisor to the president, testified that communication from people connected to the Trump administration and to Congress could have influenced his cooperation with the Mueller investigation. Is this new information to you and to your committee, or were you aware of all of this?
This is new to me. This is very explosive, Wolf. I think it's very clear that this further supports the urgent need of the committee to hear from Mr. Mueller directly, to get the fully unredacted report and all of the supporting materials, and to very likely bring Mr. Flynn before the committee as well. This is new information to me. It is presumably contained in the redacted portions of the Mueller report, but is very relevant to the question of obstruction of justice. And it should be remembered that the special counsel found 10 instances where the president obstructed justice and relied on the OLC memorandum that said a sitting president can't be indicted as the basis not to move forward. So this is very, very important evidence for the committee to see.
All right, so let's deal with what he just said there. Okay, so we know, because we've read, to you and I've read, the Mueller report, and Volume 2 has to do with the obstruction portion, and that's what this Flynn cover-up is about, okay? This is about the obstruction portion. And what it says is that Flynn actually had conversations with the Trump campaign. He had conversations about working with WikiLeaks. He also had information related to the White House obstruction efforts. And this is the portion of the obstruction efforts. So we know that in the sentencing memo, Mueller is saying that Flynn should, get probation or a very light prison sentence because he is assisted, and I'll read you from the memo, with several ongoing investigations. A criminal investigation in the Eastern District of Virginia that is likely to result in criminal charges. That's an ongoing investigation. And the special counsel's office investigation concerning any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald J. Trump, and redacted. So here's what the judge said. Judge Emmett Sullivan said, now we want the whole portion of the Mueller report, unredacted. The judge is saying, I want this, and I want this unredacted. I want all the underlying evidence. I want everything, and I want it now. If it even has any possibility of relating to Michael Flynn. So the judge is asking for the unredacted Mueller report with regard to the WikiLeaks, working with the Trump campaign and WikiLeaks. He wants all the conversations about the Trump campaign and Russian government officials before and after Flynn made his guilty plea, which means that the obstruction was ongoing, just like Manafort. Remember, Manafort had entered into a plea deal, and Manafort, they had to take Manafort back to court because during the plea agreement, Manafort began to lie to Mueller yet again. Remember that? Well, they tried it with Flynn too. Now, Manafort played with Trump, and look where it got him. Flynn did not. So the judge is saying that not only does he want the Mueller report unredacted, but he wants the transcripts of any voicemails, of any phone conversations that Flynn produced for Robert Mueller, or any that he knows of to this minute, provided in a public transcript. And he wants it posted on a court website by the 31st of May. You know what's interesting is the underlying evidence. This is what Emmett Sullivan wants. He wants the underlying evidence. Do you remember? You see, this is why it's a little upsetting that there's like a preconceived idea about who the Democratic nominee is going to be, because you got some amazing people. You remember when Kamala actually questioned Bill Barr? It was an amazing question and answer, 5 minutes. I mean, that's all she had. And she asked him this question. She asked about, did you read the underlying evidence? Did you look at anything but Mueller's report? Or did you actually listen to or look at or read or study the underlying evidence? And his answer was no. And that was stunning.
My question is, in reaching your conclusion, did you personally review all of the underlying evidence?
No, we took and accepted. We accepted.
Did Mr. Rosenstein?
No, we accepted the statements in the report as the factual record. We did not go underneath it to see whether or not they were accurate. We accepted it as accurate and made our.
So you accepted the report as the evidence?
Yes.
You did not question or look at the underlying evidence that supports the conclusions in the report?
No.
Did Mr. Rosenstein review the evidence that underlines and supports the conclusions in the report, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge. We accepted the statements in the report.
Did
and
anyone
the characterization of the evidence is true.
Did anyone in your executive office review the evidence supporting the report?
No.
No.
That was sickening. That was shocking. Okay, that the Attorney General of the United States did not look at any of the underlying evidence that supported Mueller's conclusions. Now, what the judge is asking for is obviously the underlying evidence that supported Mueller's conclusions. He wants the still redacted portions of the Mueller report that relate to Michael Flynn. He wants it given to the court, and he wants it made public. Some of the things that Barr refused to look at, some of the underlying evidence, was a December 2016 phone call where Michael Flynn is talking to the Kremlin And he's telling them, don't get too riled up about the sanctions that Barack Obama had just announced. Give Trump time to take office. That particular phone call, we know now, and we've known this for a while, was intercepted by U.S. intelligence because we always monitor Russians speaking in the United States. And it was with Ambassador Kislyak. And of course, Ambassador Kislyak was routinely recorded, and Ambassador Kislyak would have known that. It raised grave concerns. And also there are frequent and secret contacts with Trump allies and his advisors during the campaign and before his inauguration with the transition team. There is a second conversation where an attorney for Donald Trump tried to learn whether or not Michael Flynn had any problematic information about the president's contacts and the president's campaign's contacts and the president's transition team's contacts with Russians. Also, on the obstruction portion, John Dowd, then the private attorney for Donald Trump, had called Michael Flynn and said, you know, pretty much don't cooperate with the FBI. Because remember, Donald Trump, he loves you. He loves you, Michael. Pretty much dangling a pardon in front of Michael Flynn in exchange for him not testifying, not cooperating. And so now, well, there's a whole bunch too. There are multiple episodes in which, quote, he or his attorneys received communications from persons connected to the administration or Congress.
To speak to Randy, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
Randy Rhodes. Air Force.
I'm David Pakman, host of The David Pakman Show on the Progressive Voices channel. Check out this clip from my show. This is an interesting story that I thought I'd bring up with you today. There's been a debate recently over the claim that Elizabeth Warren predicted the 2008 financial crisis before it happened. And most of the focus on this story has been on the wrong thing. Most of the focus has been on determining, did Elizabeth Warren predict the financial crisis or did she not actually predict the financial crisis? But I don't actually think that that's the right argument at all to be having. I'll tell you the facts first, and then I'll tell you why I think the entire conversation is being framed incorrectly. 2020 Democratic candidate Elizabeth Warren did a CNN town hall. And one of the things that she said was that she predicted the 2008 financial crisis. She said, quote, and starting in the early 2000s, the crisis was coming. I was waving my arms, ringing the bell, doing everything I could. I said families are getting cheated all over this country. It started when the mortgage companies targeted communities of color. They targeted seniors. They targeted Latinos. They came in and sold the worst possible mortgages and stripped wealth out of those communities and then took those products across the nation. I went everywhere I could. I talked about it to anyone who would listen. A crisis is coming. So is this true that she did this? Basically, it is. Okay. Before 2008, Elizabeth Warren was talking about the impending housing and financial crisis. In her 2003 book, she talked about it, subprime lending and housing crisis. In 2004 on PBS, she said that the growing household debt, the growing number of risky mortgage lending practices are causing a problem. In 2005, she told the New York Times that the amount of home equity debt that homeowners were getting into was a big red flag. And PolitiFact looked at this and determined, yes, Elizabeth Warren did predict the financial crisis. But here's my reaction. So what? Elizabeth Warren did predict the financial crisis, but why is that a big deal? Tons of people predicted it. Tons are predicting another crisis now, and none of it is even remotely notable or requires special insight to predict. What I mean by that is, obviously, our economic system and circumstances are not sustainable. Of course, there's always a financial crisis or a major downturn somewhere on the horizon. The question is it a year away or 4 years away or 8 years away? I don't know how notable it is that Elizabeth Warren predicted something that anyone who understands the boom and bust cycles of our economic system has been predicting as a matter of fact for decades, or for as long as they've been following the economy. These boom bust cycles are implicit and inherent to the economic system that we have. They're always on the horizon. The question is just when. So one of the reactions to this entire Elizabeth Warren thing has been, well, we would care about whether she did or didn't predict it because we should want a president who has the foresight to predict when the next crisis will be. Well, okay, that may be, but anybody who understands how the economy works should understand that there's always a looming crisis on the horizon. There's always a looming downturn on the horizon because it's implicit to the system we have. The vulture capitalist cycles of boom and bust that increase inequality and increase despair don't happen less frequently unless we actually deal with the problems inherent to the system that we have. So Elizabeth Warren predicted it.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randy, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Well, yeah, Jim, I mean, this is a really brand new information that we're getting. We knew that there was some of this outreach, but the specificity of this that is coming out in this this document that was newly unredacted really goes to show that there was this big effort to try to get Flynn perhaps to change his testimony or to not cooperate fully with the special counsel. It does raise the question as to why no one got in trouble for that. Perhaps
really?
That still could happen, but the Mueller investigation has wrapped up and no one was charged with this. And, you really get a sense from these documents that Flynn was a very valuable witness to the special counsel. That's one reason why they recommended no jail time for him as a result of pleading guilty to false statements to the FBI. And as you said, there was somebody connected to the administration, somebody connected to to Congress who was doing this outreach and trying to get Flynn to essentially withhold some cooperation according to this document.
This is disgusting, and it really does prove that Congress is they're complicit, they're corrupt, they knew, they understood what was going on, they were warned about what was going on, they were told what was going on, they were briefed about what was going on while it was going on, and then after it went on. And then during the obstruction, they were part of the obstruction. This is sick and twisted, and it's dangerous, and here we are. And here we are. And, the lawyers are calling Flynn. The lawyers who are as corrupt as Congress members, they're all calling Flynn. Don't cooperate. Protect the president. He's got your back. Don't worry. He'll pardon you. He'll let you go. This explains everything. Why the president was saying, can't you just let Flynn go? The president today, he's saying he didn't know about Michael Flynn. Nobody told him about Michael Flynn. If they would have told him about Michael Flynn, he would have made a different choice, just like he didn't know Jeff Sessions had to recuse himself. He didn't know. It's not fair. He's the victim, right? President Trump is the victim. He was spied on, and he's the victim, and nobody told him. Everybody told him. Don't you remember Barack Obama told him? There was a meeting right after the election. Right after, in the White House, there were two meetings. There was one private meeting between Obama and Donald Trump. And Obama told Donald Trump that he had fired Michael Flynn. He fired him from he was the director of national intelligence, and he fired him. Said he had problems with this guy. He had a really bad attitude. He was a terrible manager, and there was something about him, and he just didn't think that was a good choice for the Trump administration to put in such a sensitive position as national security advisor. He said, I fired him. He said, I don't think he should be a top national security aide. He expressed multiple concerns multiple times because they met on November 10th, and then they did a public thing in the Oval Office on November 11th. We all saw that one. Okay? And he told him, and it was first reported by NBC News that, Barack Obama had warned Donald Trump not to choose Michael Flynn for anything related to national security. And then Sally Flynn, right after Trump is sworn in, like 4 days after, Michael, 4 days after Trump is sworn in as president of the United States, Sally Yates sends warnings to the White House, calls Don McGahn, right, on January 24th, 2017. Michael Flynn is interviewed by the FBI. And that was their first in-person meeting. And Sally Yates calls Don McGahn, the White House counsel, to protect. This guy was supposed to be protecting the office of the presidency, right? And she tells him that the FBI has intercepted conversations with Michael Flynn, talking about sanctions with the Russians and other things, and that she needs him to take some action. He asks for a readout of the FBI interview. Okay, and the next day, January 25th, 2017, she sends over to the Department of Justice a detailed readout of the FBI agents who had interviewed Michael Flynn. And she tells Don McGahn, quote, "It's important to get this information to the White House as quickly as possible." The next day, January 26th, Yates calls Don McGahn first thing in the morning and tells him, "I have a very sensitive matter. I have to talk to you face to face." And McGahn agreed to meet with her later that afternoon. So this is not even a week into the presidency. Later that afternoon, on the 26th of January, she goes to the White House. She takes a member of the Department of Justice's National Security Division, somebody who was overseeing the counterintelligence investigation. Remember, this wasn't a criminal investigation. This was a counterintelligence investigation, the result of which still resides with Christopher Wray over at the FBI. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen anything on that. But anyway, at the first meeting with Don McGahn, Sally Yates is in Don McGahn's office, which also is a SCIF, a sensitive compartmentalized information facility. So you could talk, without any possibility of anybody listening to what you're saying. And she tells Don McGahn first she lays out the press accounts, and then she lays out the statements that Mike Pence is making and other high-ranking White House officials are making about Flynn's conduct. And she said, we know that's not true. We know that Michael Flynn was talking to Russians, and we know he's been doing it for a really long time. And he's lying to Mike Pence, but that's not the important part. She tells him how the information was collected. In a very granular level of detail, she explains to him about how Kislyak is routinely surveilled, and Michael Flynn is an idiot, and he's talking on phones to Kislyak, and they have all the intercepts, all of the conversations, and that this conduct of Flynn's is problematic because when Pence goes out to lie, the Russians know that he's being lied to by Michael Flynn. And the Russians can now blackmail the National Security Advisor of the United States of America. And that is dangerous because if Flynn continues to lie to the vice president and the vice president continues to say false things, the Russians know where it's coming from. And the Russians can then blackmail our National Security Advisor as things, progress in the administration, as they get tense. She said this was a problem, not because not only did we believe that the Russians knew that Flynn was lying, but that they had proof that Flynn was lying. And that created a compromise situation, a situation where the National Security Advisor essentially could be blackmailed by the Russians. She presents all this information to Don McGahn and says to the White House, you have to take action. McGahn says, what's the problem if, one member of the administration lies to another? And she says it's not that they lie to each other, it's that the Russians know who the liar is, that they can prove who the liar is, and the liar is your National Security Advisor. Fire this guy. And 18 days go by and nothing's done about Flynn. Nothing at all.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience. Visit randyrhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Whether you're listening to me, Mark Levine, every Thursday,
or me, Leslie Marshall, each Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday,
you can hear us from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Progressive Voices Network.
Here's a sample of what you'll hear.
We face the first time in all of American history where the president has basically said, I don't give a damn about the Constitution. The Congress has no power. I'm going to arrogate upon myself all power. Now, we've never had that happen in America. It's certainly happened in other countries. We've certainly seen it with Vladimir Putin in Russia, Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Even Erdogan in Turkey is a horrific example of how a long-time functioning democracy can turn into a dictatorship. You know, I think we're pretty complacent in America. We think, you know, we've been around for 240 years. Democracy is assured. We've gone through phases, right? First only white men with property could vote, and then all white men could vote, and then, at least we passed an amendment that said black men could vote. Of course, that right was taken away for another 100 years. And then women could vote, and then in the 60s, finally, the 1960s, allowed black folks to vote, even though they were supposedly granted that right in the 1860s. But it's been mostly a steady march forward, although, again, the 100 years from the 1860s to 1960s should give us pause that we always move forward in a more progressive democratic direction. Still, we've never had a president say, as King Louis XIV did before the French Revolution, King Louis XVI, L'État c'est moi, the state, it's me. I'm it. I'm in charge. Like the Egyptian pharaohs, no one can go against me. Even King George III had to deal with Parliament. But Donald Trump has said he will not obey any congressional subpoenas on any topic. It's a complete stonewall. And that may well be his downfall, because I think the ball has moved a step closer to the field. Even Nancy Pelosi, I'm getting a lot of pushback from my wonderful Democratic friends. Why isn't he impeached already? And while I agree the evidence is overwhelming that Donald Trump should be impeached and removed from office, I know enough about politics to know that, well, if you're going to attack the king, you better kill him. If you're going to remove the president, you better succeed, because if you don't, then your failure makes things a lot worse.
Again, that's Mark Levine every Thursday.
And Leslie Marshall each Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday.
3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Progressive Voices Network.
The rich aren't merely different from you and me. They're ridiculous. The uber rich, I mean, the billionaire barons of Wall Street who literally live above the real world and are clueless about the gross inequality their financial schemes are creating. Take Kenneth Griffin, a hedge fund tycoon who's the latest gold medal champion of conspicuous consumption. He just paid an obscene $238 million for a sprawling 24,000-square-foot New York City penthouse located 79 stories above street level at Central Park South, a strip nicknamed Billionaire's Row. His 3-floor mansion in the sky is the most expensive residential purchase in U.S. history, exceeding the excesses of robber barons in the Gilded Age. Adding to the overindulgence, he'll live there only occasionally, for he also has a $60 million penthouse in Miami, a $122 million mansion in London, and posh crash pads elsewhere. Griffin is the poster child for that disgraceful Trump GOP tax cut for the super rich, which they passed by claiming that beneficiaries like Ken would put their windfall into jobs and wage increases for the working class. Interestingly, his exclusive skyscraper residence replaces a modest 20-story building of affordable rent-controlled apartments where dozens of middle-class tenants lived. They were evicted by the corporate developers to provide opulent digs for a few billionaires. That ought to be illegal, but instead, a state law specifically empowers landlords to toss out middle-class and low-income tenants, demolish their apartments, and put up a swank new building. If you wonder where inequality and
So is a way, yeah.
Rhodes Show is live on RandyRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
We began our meeting telling him that there had been press accounts of statements from the vice president and others that related conduct that Mr. Flynn had been involved in that we knew not to be the truth. The first thing we did was to explain to Mr. McGahn that the underlying conduct that General Flynn had engaged in was problematic in and of itself. Secondly, we told him we felt like the vice president and others were entitled to know that the information that they were conveying to the American people wasn't true. And additionally, that we weren't the only ones that knew all of this, that the Russians also knew about what General Flynn had done, and the Russians also knew that General Flynn had misled the vice president and others. And that created a compromise situation, a situation where the national security advisor essentially could be blackmailed by the Russians. And then importantly, that every time this lie was repeated, and the misrepresentations were getting more and more specific as they were coming out, every time that happened, it increased the compromise. And to state the obvious, you don't want your national security advisor compromised with the Russians.
So remember when we had that testimony from Sally Yates, we didn't really truly fully understand what she was getting at. And now we freaking do. And now we freaking know. And Flynn, who's a lieutenant general and listen, he's a lily-livered little coward. He was scared, so he decided to flip early and rat some more. And apparently he was recording conversations, as so many people around Donald Trump do. Omarosa records conversations. Michael Cohen recorded conversations. Michael Flynn, now we know, was recording conversations, because this president is such a lying sack of traitorous crap that everyone around him was CYA, every single person, because they all knew this was going to happen. They all knew that this crazy, treasonous, traitorous bargain that Donald Trump struck with Russians was going to come back and bite them. And they all needed cover, and they all needed something to offer up to get them out of hot water, okay? And Flynn was recording conversations, and the FBI counterintelligence investigation is recording Kislyak, who's on the phone with Flynn, which is how they get to Flynn in the first place. Flynn flips early, and then he starts recording Donald Trump's transition team, Donald Trump's administration. He's 18 days. The president does nothing after he's totally, full-frontally warned for the second time that Flynn is a traitor to his country. Obama warned him. He said he took this trip to Moscow in 2015. It was off the hook. He's getting paid. I fired him. DIA, just took him out. I don't think he's a good choice for you. Just saying. Tried to tell him twice. Trump said, screw it. I need this guy because he's talking to Russia. Because he's coordinating WikiLeaks. Because he'll protect Stone and Corsi and my son. This is crazy. And Donald Trump has the nerve, I want to use a different word, to tweet this morning. He actually tweeted, it now seems that... I'll just read what he wrote, not what he meant, because what he wrote, it's like, the man can't spell the word council, and he can't spell, there. He wrote, it now seems the General Flynn. That's what he wrote. It now seems the General Flynn was under investigation long before it was common knowledge. It would have been impossible for me to know this, but if that was the case, and with me being one of two people who could become president, why was I not told so that I could make a change? He's a lying sack of crap. Here's a little flashback for you. Here's Sean Spicer admitting that Obama told Donald Trump that Michael Flynn was a bad guy.
It doesn't disclose details of meetings that he has, which in this case was an hour-long meeting, but it's true that President Obama made it known that he wasn't exactly a fan of General Flynn's, which is frankly shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, that given that General Flynn had worked for President Obama, was an outspoken critic of President Obama's shortcomings, specifically as it related to his lack of strategy confronting ISIS and other threats around that were facing America. So the question that you have to ask yourself really is, if President Obama was truly concerned about General Flynn, why didn't he suspend General Flynn's security clearance, which they had just reapproved months earlier? Additionally, why did the Obama administration let Flynn go to Russia for a paid speaking engagement and receive a fee? I mean, there were steps that they could have taken that, if that was truly a concern more than just a person that had bad blood.
So now we know the reason why Flynn went to work for Donald Trump was because Flynn was a traitor, and Obama knew it, and Obama fired him. And that's the bad blood. That's the bad blood. Flynn hated Obama because Obama caught on to his taking money from Russia and Flynn's, antics. And the reason why they don't take away your security clearance, I had a security clearance. They don't take it away. You just stop getting briefings. You just don't have a need to know anymore, and you just don't get any information sent to you. So this was a red herring too. But obviously, Obama warned, and Trump is lying, and Sally Yates warned, and Trump is lying, and Elijah Cummings also. Elijah Cummings from the House Oversight Committee, he wrote a 5-page letter to Donald Trump warning him about a whistleblower who knew that Michael Flynn was texting and communicating with Russians, and he tried to warn President Trump to get rid of Michael Flynn, and yet he keeps Michael Flynn. He keeps Michael Flynn because he has to keep Michael Flynn. He keeps Michael Flynn even after every single person of any weight in this government tells him Michael Flynn is working with the Russians. Michael Flynn is a bad guy. Michael Flynn is a traitor. Michael Flynn has sold this country out. Michael Flynn is not trustworthy. Michael Flynn should not be anywhere near intelligence information. And of course, he's not getting any. And then Michael Flynn goes out on the road, and Michael Flynn is leading these locker-up chants. And now Michael Flynn is facing jail. I mean, it's just such a beautiful, unbelievable story, and we need more of this irony. We need much, much more of this irony to happen. Much, much more. Now, I don't know how far we're going to get in holding this president accountable outside of an election in 2020. That is going to be obviously something Russia wants to deal in, something Russia wants to play in. They played here in Florida in 2018. We're not even sure what counties they played in, but we know that election, registration rolls were hacked. We know that they're still around. Everyone has warned us, from Chris Wray to, Clint Watts to, people that work in cybersecurity at, then they shut down the cybersecurity, outfit in the Department of Homeland Security. They do that so that Russia can play. So to pin all of our hopes and dreams on replacing Donald Trump via an election in 2020 is a little strange. And yet here we are, not knowing, can we lock up Bill Barr? Can we, we held him in contempt, but can we actually go have the sergeant at arms put him in a hotel, or put him in that little, cell that's below the Capitol? Can we, what is possible? What can we do? What can we do? We don't know what we can do. We don't know, because we've never had a president who sold out his country. We've never had this happen. We don't know what to do about a president who is a traitor to the nation. We don't know what to do about an attorney general who protects a traitor and who's willing to lie. I mean, this is just unbelievable. I don't know if you saw this. I doubt it. I would have missed it if it wasn't for the internet, because I refuse. I cannot watch this channel anymore. It's just so bizarre and so off the hook and so divorced from the crimes that have actually been committed, that it makes it like it's like reading 1984 all over again. The 2-minute hate and the newspeak and the memory hole for news, and freedom is slavery and war is peace and up is down and black is white. But when we come back, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you how much of a liar Bill Barr really is. This is the reason you collect sound bites from hearings. This is the reason why you stress out when you're in my position to actually get the clips of the hearings, of the testimony under oath, because you know you're going to need them. You know you are. That's why I have Sally Yates. That's why I have James Comey's testimony. Well, we're going to revisit Bill Barr and all of Bill Barr's lies. And we'll start with Bill Barr lying last night. He actually went on Fox and Friends and says that he's investigating the origins of the counterintelligence investigation that was opened up, which we clearly know. Flynn was obviously being recorded. George Papadopoulos was obviously spilling his guts over too much wine.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force. The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
The rich aren't merely different from you and me. They're ridiculous. The uber rich, the billionaire barons of Wall Street who literally live above the real world and are clueless about the gross inequality their financial schemes are creating. Take Kenneth Griffin, a hedge fund tycoon who's the latest gold medal champion of conspicuous consumption. He just paid an obscene $238 million for a sprawling 24,000 square foot New York City penthouse located 79 stories above street level at Central Park South, a strip nicknamed Billionaire's Row. His 3-floor mansion in the sky is the most expensive residential purchase in U.S. history, exceeding the excesses of robber barons in the Gilded Age. Adding to the overindulgence, he'll live there only occasionally, for he also has a $60 million penthouse in Miami, a $122 million mansion in London, and posh crash pads elsewhere. Griffin is the poster child for that disgraceful Trump GOP tax cut for the super rich, which they passed by claiming that beneficiaries like Ken would put their windfall into jobs and wage increases for the working class. Interestingly, his exclusive skyscraper residence replaces a modest 20-story building of affordable rent-controlled apartments where dozens of middle-class tenants lived. They were evicted by the corporate developers to provide opulent digs for a few billionaires. That ought to be illegal, but instead, a state law specifically empowers landlords to toss out middle-class and low-income tenants, demolish their apartments, and put up a swank new building. If you wonder where inequality and America's affordable housing crisis comes...
Now, the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn presents the Green News Report.
CAL FIRE says that the campfire actually started in 2 separate locations, but that both ignitions were started by PG&E lines.
Utility company power lines caused deadliest fire in California history.
ExxonMobil knew exactly that climate change was real and man-made as far back as 1970.
Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere hits disturbing milestone just as Exxon predicted decades ago. Delaying action on climate change could cost investors more than $1 trillion. Plus,
plant-based alternatives to meat might be considered fake, but the growth of the industry is very real.
Burger King takes the impossible Whopper nationwide.
All of those impossibilities and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Bad news for vegetarians. America is running out of Impossible Burgers. I know, it seems unlikely.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I think we all knew this was going to happen, but we now have the official cause of the fire that burned down Paradise last year.
Yes, that's true. The California Department of Forestry confirmed on Wednesday that the deadly and devastating Camp Fire that obliterated the town of Paradise, California last November was caused by aging electrical transmission lines owned by Pacific Gas and Electric. The most people and destroyed nearly 19,000 homes and buildings. PG&E has since filed for bankruptcy protection to deal with the flood of lawsuits from catastrophic fires caused by its equipment over the last 2 years. years. The utility's new CEO pledged to state lawmakers on Wednesday to implement new policies to reduce the risk of catastrophic fires in the future.
Isn't it time that California simply take over PG&E at this point after deadly failure after failure like this?
That is under consideration because PG&E may also potentially face criminal charges.
And this supports your argument that you've offered for many years that these power lines ought to be buried. That ought to be part of the Green New Deal.
Meanwhile, the insurance industry is beginning to grapple with the mounting costs of climate impacts. It's now the top concern of the insurance industry. In the annual survey of insurance companies released this week by the Society of Actuaries, insurers listed climate change as the biggest risk facing their industry by far. Failure to act on climate change is a big risk for investors, too. A new global assessment from the United Nations Environment Finance Initiative brought together 20 global fund managers to measure the impact of climate change on 30,000 of the world's largest listed companies. The report that they released this week calculated that further delay in tackling climate change could cost companies about $1.2 trillion worldwide over just the next 15 years.
But we can't afford to do anything about climate change, right?
That's what Republicans say.
They do.
And this week, scientists at Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii announced that the planet's atmosphere has now reached 415 parts per million of carbon dioxide due to human activity. The last time CO2 levels were this high, humans didn't exist. But ExxonMobil nailed it. Internal company documents revealed in a blockbuster expose by Inside Climate News show that all the way back in 1982, Exxon's own scientists informed its executives that burning fossil fuels would increase atmospheric CO2 to around 415 parts per million by 2020. And they predicted it would raise global temperatures nearly a full degree Celsius, causing major disruptions to the planet's stable climate. They were right about both targets.
They knew when this was going to happen for the first time in human history, and they knew to cover it up with millions of dollars.
And that's exactly what freshman Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York said when she slammed ExxonMobil in a fiery speech at a rally this week at D.C.'s Howard University to promote the Green New Deal. Ocasio-Cortez slammed polluters and politicians who claim the cost of fighting the climate crisis is too much.
What is too much for me is the fact that ExxonMobil knew exactly that climate change was real and man-made as far back as 1970, and instead of being part of the solution, they paid millions of dollars to lobby and lie and confuse the American public about it, endangering generations to come. That is too much for me.
And finally, a bit of good news. Fast food giant Burger King says its recent market test of the meat-free Impossible Whopper in St. Louis was so successful, it will roll out the plant-based burger patty to all of its more than 7,000 stores nationwide. It's just the latest and largest fast food chain to offer consumers meat-free choices. Eating less meat is just one way individuals can reduce their impact on the planet.
Very cool. You know, Del Taco's Beyond Taco is also delicious.
Good.
Better than their meat taco. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News.
Mary had a little man. The fault.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
Hey! It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
What I will say is that I've been trying to get answers to questions, and I found that a lot of the answers have been inadequate, and I've also found that some of the explanations I've gotten don't hang together. So in a sense, I have more questions today than I did when I first started.
Some of what things don't hang together?
Some of the explanations of what occurred.
Why does that matter?
Well, because I think people have to find out what the government was doing during that period. If we're worried about foreign influence, for the very same reason, we should be worried about whether government officials abuse their power and put their thumb on the scale. And so I'm not saying that happened.
Right, because it didn't.
But I'm saying that we have to look at that.
Can you say
Oh, my God.
when Bob Mueller knew there was no collusion with Russia?
No, I couldn't say that.
No date given?
No, I couldn't say when he knew.
This man is a world heavyweight champion liar, and he's a misdirector. You know, I told you, magicians misdirect for your entertainment, and con men misdirect for their entertainment and their benefit. And that's what Bill Barr is. He's a con man who is protecting a traitor. Literally, a man who is a traitor to our nation, the President of the United States. It's very sick. He did this interview last night from El Salvador. And he said, I have more questions than it. I'm not saying that, anybody did anything that was illegal. I'm not saying that, but I'm going to name check some people. Yeah, I'm going to name check Comey, Clapper, and Brennan.
Republicans have said for months that these men, Brennan, Clapper, maybe James Comey, had it in for Trump. Do you think that's true?
Again, I'm not going to speculate about their motives.
In the period of time between Election Day and the inauguration, did anyone in government or in intelligence, did they take action to justify their decisions?
Between Election Day, did you say?
Between Election Day of 2016 in November and Inauguration Day.
I think there were some very strange developments during that period. That's one of the things we want to look into.
Such as?
Such as the handling of the meeting on January 6th between the intelligence chiefs and the president, and the leaking of information subsequent to that meeting.
Was that meeting in New York City?
Yes.
In Trump Tower?
Yes.
What questions do you have about what happened that day?
Again, I'm not going to get into that.
But it's on your mind.
That's one of the things we need to look at.
Can you characterize how far advanced you are in understanding that meeting?
We're still in the stage of gathering all the information.
You got nothing, and you're just putting out like chum is what he's doing. He's just chumming the waters and trying to find some Cult 45 members, some hungry Trumpanzees, and just feeding them, well, let me just float these words. Let me say the word spy. Let me say the word I have more questions than answers. Let me say that I'm not saying anything, ugly happened. But it's possible that when I look into it somewhere that I'll find, but right now, no. And this is crazy. Look, he's a liar. Here was the first time that we knew that Bill Barr was a liar. He was asked in a press conference before the Mueller report was released whether or not Mueller decided not to indict the president because of the Office of Legal Counsel's rule that says you can't indict a sitting president. He said he spoke to Mueller, and Mueller told him that is not the reason why he's not indicting the president.
On March 5th, we specifically asked him about the OLC opinion and whether or not he was taking the position that he would have found a crime but for the existence of the OLC opinion. And he made it very clear several times that that was not his position. He was not saying that but for the OLC opinion he would have found a crime. He made it clear that he had not made the determination that there was a crime.
That's a lie. Anybody who's read the Mueller report knows that's a lie because it's clearly in the Mueller report that but for the OLC, he would have indicted. He could not state that the president was exonerated. If he could, he said he would so state. But because of the OLC rule that you can't indict a sitting president, Mueller says that it wouldn't be fair to bring charges against Trump because he wouldn't be able to defend himself in court. I mean, that is a freaking lie.
Michael Flynn, once again, the former national security advisor to the president, testified that communication from people connected to the Trump administration and to Congress could have influenced his cooperation with the Mueller investigation. Is this new information to you and to your committee, or were you aware of all of this?
This is new to me. This is very explosive, Wolf. I think it's very clear that this further supports the urgent need of the committee to hear from Mr. Mueller directly, to get the fully unredacted report and all of the supporting materials, and to very likely bring Mr. Flynn before the committee as well. This is new information to me. It is presumably contained in the redacted portions of the Mueller report, but is very relevant to the question of obstruction of justice. And it should be remembered that the special counsel found 10 instances where the president obstructed justice and relied on the OLC memorandum that said a sitting president can't be indicted as the basis not to move forward. So this is very, very important evidence for the committee to see.
I mean, anybody that's read it, anybody that has even read the, excerpts knows that the entire premise of Bob Mueller going in was that you can't indict a sitting president. Everybody knows that. And Bill Barr is playing you for a moron. He's playing you for a sucker. He's lying to you. Then we found out that Mueller has been writing letters, multiple letters, 2 letters to Bill Barr. He wrote one on March 24th to say he was mischaracterizing the findings of his report, and he wrote again and told him that you're mischaracterizing the substance of the report. When Bill Barr was asked about that, he lied under oath.
Reports have emerged recently, General, that members of the special counsel's team are frustrated at some level with the limited information included in your March 24th letter, that it does not adequately or accurately necessarily portray the report's findings. Do you know what they're referencing with that?
No, I don't.
No, I don't. Yeah, he does. He got 2 letters and a phone call, and he refused to tell Charlie Crist, the congressman, in the Appropriations Committee subcommittee hearing about it. He also lied to Chris Van Hollen, okay, who asked him, why did you put this out? Knowing that, that Mueller didn't, that he had written summaries that were totally suitable for public consumption. Why did you do this?
You sent a letter to the United States Congress that included something which was a principal conclusion, which was not a conclusion reached by the Mueller report. You indicated that they did not exonerate the president.
Right.
You did.
Right.
And so I'm asking you whether you agree with Mueller that there were difficult issues of law and fact in making that assessment.
That's not a question I really can answer until I think.
Well, you did it, but you looked at the report, right? And you looked at the evidence of the report, and you made a decision. And you said that the president's not guilty of criminal obstruction of justice. I'm asking you, in your review of the report, did you agree with Mueller that there were difficult issues of law and fact?
I'm going to give my reaction and comments, about the report after the report.
Well, it would have been, but you put your view of the report out there on this issue of obstruction of justice, right? Nobody asked you to do that.
I didn't put my view of the report.
Well, you put your assessment on, you made a conclusion on the question of obstruction of justice that was not contained in the Mueller report. And I'm simply asking you,
why?
When you looked at the evidence, did you agree with Mueller and his team that there were difficult issues of law and fact?
As I say, I am going to explain my decision, and to the extent that requires any assessment of the Mueller report, I'm going to do that when the Mueller report is out.
Did your decision require you to look into the intent of the President of the United States with respect to obstruction of justice?
I'm not going to discuss my decision. I will lay it out after the report is out.
This man is a lying sack of crap, and he is protecting a president who committed traitorous, treacherous acts against the people of the United States. That is a fact. And he is lying for this president and mischaracterizing what is in that report on purpose, for the purpose of ginning up his base to believe that the president didn't do these things, which clearly there are recordings of people in the Trump campaign, evidence of coordination with WikiLeaks, evidence of coordination with the Russian government, evidence of meetings with the Russian government's assets, and he's just lying.
Clear
last few months, Herky Jerky has offered some really great specials on bacon and turkey and beef jerky. With a new month upon us, it's a perfect time to include all of their products into the mix, so you could choose from everything in their online store and still save. For the entire month of May, all Herky Jerky orders of $50 or more get an automatic $10 off. You don't need a promo code, and free shipping is included. That means you can choose from bacon, turkey, 4 kinds of beef jerky, buffalo, elk, venison jerky. You can also grab the delicious meat sticks, buffalo, elk, venison, and 3 flavors of beef smokies, mild, jalapeno, and honey. And for those of you who have never tried game meat, I dare you to find a better tasting meat stick than the award-winning venison, and it comes in hot or mild. It's been a bestseller since 1992. The choice is yours this month, and whatever you decide, don't worry, you can't go wrong. All Herky Jerky products, they come fresh to your door. They're mailed the next day using USPS priority mail. They make great snacks for you. They're great gifts for family, friends. Don't forget your mom, because your mom would be thrilled. I know I'm thrilled when I get my hands on their delicious, low-fat, high-protein, low-carb products. What a great Mother's Day gift. And as a reminder, yes, you get $10 automatically deducted from your shopping cart when checking out, and you don't need a promo code. And if you want to order by phone, feel free. Call Jason directly at 215-479-6280. 215-479-6280. Or just visit herkyjerky.com. Herky Jerky says thank you for your loyal support for their incredible business, and we thank Herky Jerky for their incredible support of the Randi Rhodes Show. Visit herkyjerky.com now.
Welcome back to my podcast. This is Richard Painter. This is a very dangerous situation. Once again, we need to think seriously about the War Powers Act, and whether the President of the United States has too much power to get this country into a war through acts of aggression or injudicious responses to various incidents abroad. And it's not, as I said, not that this is without provocation, but this president is not someone who is fit to respond to the crises around the world, particularly military crises, in this situation where he's being impeached potentially, and also, given his state of mind, which we see every day on Twitter, and his extreme emotional reactions that have led many psychologists and psychiatrists to believe that he is not mentally fit to carry forth with his duties as President of the United States, particularly with respect to the use of nuclear weapons and commanding our armed forces in times of war, or
All things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Nancy Pelosi, she believes you lied under oath. What do you think of that charge?
Well, I think it's a laughable charge, and I think it's largely being made to try to discredit me, partly because they may be concerned about the outcome of a review of what happened during the election. But obviously, you can look at the face of my testimony and see on its face that there's nothing inaccurate about it.
Yeah, I can't look at your testimony and see that there's nothing false on its face. You lied about the OLC opinion. We've played you that. You lied about the fact that you got 2 letters from Bob Mueller saying you were mischaracterizing the substance of his findings. And you sit there and you tell the Fox News viewer, oh, I think that they're calling me a liar because they're worried about a review. This would be the 3rd freaking review of how this counterintelligence investigation was opened. There was an investigation into the FBI by Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General. There was an investigation by Devin Nunes in Congress. Okay, and now, lordy, there are tapes that clearly show why this counterintelligence investigation was open. So this is all bullcrap. But you know what? I got to tell you, at least now, some people like Nancy Pelosi are uttering the words impeachment.
When they are saying, unless you have a legislative purpose, you cannot ask any questions. You cannot investigate unless you have a legislative purpose. But one of the purposes of that the Constitution spells out for investigation is impeachment.
Hello.
And so you can say, and the courts would respect if you said, we need this information to carry out our oversight responsibilities. And among them is impeachment. It doesn't mean you're going on an impeachment path,
3 times.
but it means if you had the information, you might. So it isn't about impeachment, it's about impeachment as a purpose.
5 times she said the word impeachment in an affirmative sense. 5 times she said, you know, maybe you do get to impeachment. We need to investigate, and one of the legitimate legislative purposes of oversight is maybe we get to enough crime, enough high crime, enough misdemeanors that we actually have to impeach. Oh, yay, Nancy. Oh, yay. Now, the Trump administration is refusing, you know, today at 5 o'clock, it's now 5:23 Eastern time on May 17th, Friday, 2019. And the deadline for producing his tax returns has come and gone. The president is in defiance of yet another subpoena. AG Barr is in defiance of a subpoena and has already been voted, at least by the Judiciary Committee, to be in contempt of Congress. The president is now in contempt of Congress. I mean, what in the world are we freaking waiting for? Open an impeachment inquiry and do it today. I understand it's 5:30 on a Friday night. Everybody's going home. They're traveling. They've been gone since yesterday. But this is the United States of America. This is our democracy hanging in the balance. And the more they debate the politics of it, the more corrupt this president is going to get. And what's the evidence? What's the evidence that he will go all the freaking way down that rat hole of martial law insurrection? Well, this morning on Fox and Friends, Steve Doocy was interviewing Hogan. Gee, I'm giddy about this martial law proposal. And the audience in New York was cheering for Donald Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act. Do you know what that is? Using the United States military inside the United States to put down an insurrection or an invasion, and they're interpreting a bunch of Hondurans who are fleeing violence as an invasion. Seriously, listen to this.
There's a suggestion in, I think I was reading the Washington Post this morning, they were repeating what was in the Daily Caller yesterday about how people in the administration are talking about using the Insurrection Act, which hasn't been used in a long time. It lets the president use the military to combat lawlessness or rebellion or to remove illegal immigrants.
Right.
Is the administration considering the Insurrection Act?
Look, the president has been very clear. He's going to do everything within his...
Is that a yes or a no?
He is going to do everything within his legal authority to protect the American people and the families across this country. No, I'm just saying there are lots of tools at his disposal. We haven't used them all, and we're looking at ways to protect the American people.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Last time we used it, I believe, was the L.A. riots. Where the military came in and said, we're going to need military presence there. This is something, the military's there, but they can't do as much as they want.
Can you believe this? Now, I want you to understand that the conservatives in this country, the Tea Party freaks and the neocons and all, kept on screaming about martial law. Obama's going to declare martial law. This one's going to declare martial law. That one's going to... They are literally floating the idea of declaring martial law. They are literally floating the idea of using the Insurrection Act, which has never, ever been used in this country for immigration purposes. Not once, not ever, not in the 1700s, not in the 1800s, not ever. Not ever. and they are talking out loud about mobilizing the National Guard, about mobilizing the U.S. military, and putting down the insurrection at the border. Now, if that happens and this president gets away with that, we're not going to have elections in 2020. We won't. We won't. The Insurrection Act hasn't been used in the Insurrection Act is this is like for the whiskey rebellion. This is like to put down slave rebellions. That's the last time that we saw the Insurrection Act. Okay, I will say HW used the National Guard in the Rodney King riots in LA, and that was it. That was the last time we ever used anything remotely like the Insurrection Act. And of course, for the National Guard to be mobilized in that fashion inside the United States, and those would be the state militias, right? I always tell you that, there is no Second Amendment right any longer because a well-regulated militia exists, and that well-regulated militia is the National Guard. Yeah. So the well-regulated militia can only be used if the governor of the state mobilizes them. The president has to go to the governor. And I'm just praying to God that governors in this country will not allow their National Guardsmen to be used as a military force inside the United States. There is no rebellion at the border. There is no invasion at the border. And here's another thing, okay? The reason why we had the Insurrection Act is to quell, invasions or rebellions before the rise of a well-trained and increasingly well-equipped police force that looked like stormtroopers.
To speak to Randy, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
Randy Rhodes. Air Force.
Whether you're listening to me, Mark Levine, every Thursday,
or me, Leslie Marshall, each Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday,
you can hear us from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Progressive Voices Network.
Here's a sample of what you'll hear. Dr. Abbas Barzagar. Dr. Barzagar is the director of the Department of Research and Advocacy for CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. Would you say it's fair that anti-Muslim bigotry has been common and widespread, and it's increased post 9/11, but even more so with the rhetoric during the campaign and since the election of our president, Donald Trump?
There are a number of studies that we have done, as well as other think tanks and academics and others out there, to measure the rise of anti-Muslim bigotry, some might call it Islamophobia, in the public space, and it definitely ticks up. And in a strange way, the further we get away from 9/11, the worse it gets.
Is it fair to say it's part of, sadly and disgustingly, our mainstream cultural and political landscape at this point in time?
Yeah, I would say that it has entered mainstream politics, and it's become a defining feature of sort of the conservative right. Now, that said, I will say that it is also a mainstream issue that people are pushing back against. And so, on one hand, anti-Muslim bigotry has entered into spaces and arenas that we never thought manageable. And then at the same time, we see a massive pushback against that. And so, in some ways, it's promising to have America wake up to saying no to racism, saying no to hate. And there's so many good intentioned folks out there on all sides of the political spectrum who are really putting their foot down and saying, this is not okay. This is really not who we are. So it's exciting to see the fight back.
Interestingly enough, CARE and other organizations, but especially CARE, have put out so much information. And with my research, I'm learning more and more. Dr. Barzagar, the attitudes, Islamophobic specifically attitudes and policies, I'm learning, and it seems to be, CARE is releasing information that shows these are propagated by special interest groups who have deep sources of funding. Can you speak to that somebody's actually paying, in a sense, for this rhetoric?
Yeah, and I thank you for bringing it up, because I think one of the most common misconceptions when it comes to issues around racism or bigotry is that we often feel like this is a conversation about personal attitudes, like personal opinions, interpersonal relationships. and that it's just something bad that, let's say, an extended family member or a friend says, and it's part of a kind of ugly character trait or a personality problem. But what we really find out, as is the case with racism, and as is the case with anti-Muslim bigotry, that there are actually organizations, foundations, institutions, people who make a living off of promoting bigotry.
You know, my husband is Muslim. His whole family is Muslim. I have off the air a Muslim last name. And after 9/11, you know, we had hateful things happen to our family, you know, people calling up and saying things that were painted, or my husband's a physician, patients that sought to go elsewhere. And that was the beginning. But not just as a human being, but as a parent, you know, I fear that the hate being propagated by the 39 Islamophobia network groups is also promoting violence. Do you think it is, Doctor?
You cannot vilify another set of people and not expect concrete consequences. Our only ask is that people do the right thing, and the philanthropic community do the right thing and help us push this kind of discourse back onto the margins of society.
Oh! Call in, connect. To speak to Randy, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
There's a suggestion I think I was reading the Washington Post this morning. They were repeating what was in the Daily Caller yesterday about how people in the administration are talking about using the Insurrection Act, which hasn't been used in a long time. It lets the president use the military to combat lawlessness or rebellion, or to remove illegal immigrants.
Right.
Is the administration considering the Insurrection Act?
Look, the president has been very clear. He's going to do everything within his...
Is that a yes or a no?
He is going to do everything within his legal authority to protect the American people and families across this country. No, I'm just saying there are lots of tools at his disposal. We haven't used them all, and we're looking at ways to protect the American people.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Last time we used it, I believe, was the LA riots. Where the military came in and said, we're going to need military presence there. This is something, the military's there, but they can't do as much as they want.
This is sick, this is dangerous, and this is where we're headed. And just the fact that it's been floated, just the fact that it's out there, just the sheer mention of using the military, and the president is saying he's going to do it, and he's going to use the military as a, quote, removal force. There are bad hombres. This is what he said in a tweet today. There are bad hombres that would be sent home, and he's going to have a removal force. A removal force. If the... there are no words. I mean, how far and how crazy are Congress members going to let this president go? I mean, there's no limit to his creepiness. There's no limit to his lawlessness. There's no limit to his lying. There's no limit to his lack of decency, compassion, or empathy. Right? It's a bottomless pit. This man is a bottomless pit of darkness. Okay, of darkness and sin and creepiness and horrendous behavior. Okay, it's just who he is. And so how far is Congress going to let this man go before they actually say, time to, convene the grand jury that is Congress and start impeachment proceedings and hobble this president from doing these kinds of things? I'll tell you another thing that's happening. It was in our paper today here in Fort Lauderdale, that they're going to move hundreds of immigrants from the U.S. border to Fort Lauderdale and Palm Beach counties, okay, to Broward County. Broward is Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach, of course, is Palm Beach. And the mayors of these and the county sheriffs of Broward County and Palm Beach County were not told what they're supposed to be doing. The president hasn't communicated. Our Florida governor, who, if I could have voted against him 10 times, I would have. But Ron DeSantis is a Republican who can't... Remember Ron DeSantis? He was dressing his baby in, Trump onesies. Remember him? So he's now our governor. in a state that had our election interfered with, and it was super close. Remember Andrew Gillum and Ron DeSantis? It was a contested thing. Yeah, well, so now the Republican, after we find out that our elections were messed with by Russians, for God's sake, I can't even believe that you have to say this. He's sitting there and he's saying the governor's office was not informed of this decision. Florida counties do not have the resources to accommodate an influx of illegal immigrants. They are putting on airplanes. Each airplane will be carrying 270 passengers, 1,000 passengers each month from the border, I'm guessing they're going to come from McAllen to Florida on planes. $6,000 a flight is what we'll be spending on it. And nobody here in Florida knows anything about it. No one knows where we're getting the money for housing, for food, for health care. Where will these kids go to school? But Donald Trump says that he's releasing these immigrants into Broward and Palm Beach counties. I just want to go on the record saying that if I can open up my house, if you need bedrooms or food or clothing or any help at all housing anybody from Central America, my house is open. I live down the street from a Jewish center. I'm sure they will open up their spaces too. I'm sure some of our schools will open up to take care of some of these people as well. And a good chunk of Broward County and Palm Beach County residents who have extra space in their homes, they will also welcome these immigrants. They're going to deliver them, just in case you're listening locally, they're going to deliver them to Border Protection offices in Dania Beach, which is Fort Lauderdale, and Riviera Beach, which is Palm Beach, and they will release them into the community. And the federal government is offering no help with this, none whatsoever. No accommodations, no transportation. They're just going to leave them in Dania, and they're going to leave them in Riviera Beach. No shelter, no place to live. They're just going to be, there. Is all that's going to happen. And so the sheriff in Fort Lauderdale, Rick Bradshaw, he asked if there was an end date to this 1,000 people a month influx into our communities. And he said, I asked if there was an end date to this, and they said no. I want you to know the mayor of Palm Beach, Mac Bernard, he said the county is going to do everything it can to help. And that they will demand reimbursement from the federal government on the back end, but we will do everything to help. Our county commissioner, Melissa McKinley, she said the federal government should provide funds up front to care for the migrants. She questioned the logic of the plan because it's almost hurricane season here. And she's like, what is smart about putting a whole bunch of people out in the open, out on the streets of Dania Beach and Riviera Beach just ahead of hurricane season when, communities are going to be battening down the hatches? But the Broward County mayor said the same thing. We'll do everything possible to help these people. We will call on nonprofits. We will call on businesses. We will call on charities to help us take these people in. Well, I'm signing up. I will take people in. There is no question I would do that. Senator Marco Rubio, he wrote a letter to the Department of Homeland Security saying, are there plans? Are there any plans? No, was the answer. There's no plans. We're just going to put them there. And the mayor of Fort Lauderdale, Dean Trentalis, he said, it's going to be disappointing to think that our federal administration are using victims of poverty and despair as pawns in a game that has become more political than substantive. And let me tell you something. That's the least of it, because a lot of people here will open up their houses. There are charities here that are prepared. There are religious communities that are prepared. There are people here who have been through this, who know what displacement is, know what it looks like, knows what it feels like to get here with nothing. We are an immigrant community here. And so it's not going to be a big damn deal for us to take 1,000 people a month. I mean, you have 15,000 people a month moving here. anyway, but it's just not going to be a thing for us. But remember, he's doing it to use these people as pawns, to punish. He thinks we're a sanctuary city-state. We're not. But that's what he's doing. He thinks that he's going to... He's not. This is so sick and twisted, the way he uses human life.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit randyrhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Hello, I'm Casey Hobbs.
And I'm Shane Mason, and we're the hosts of Nurse Talk Radio.
Here's what we're talking about this week.
Here to talk with us today to update us on all the exciting national campaign developments is California Nurses Association, National Nurses United community organizer Max Cotterill. Max, welcome to Nurse Talk, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and we know that there's a lot of exciting things happening all over the country, not to mention the momentum for Medicare for All is picking up speed, with over 70% of Americans supporting it. But Max, one event that really pleased supporters this week came from an unlikely source. Bernie Sanders did a town hall on Fox News. So let's listen for just a few seconds.
I believe that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege.
A show of hands of how many people get their insurance from work, private insurance, right now. How many get it from private insurance? Okay, now of those, how many are willing to transition to what the senator says, a government-run system?
Max, please comment on that and then talk about the nurses' support of the new Medicare for All bill Bernie Sanders introduced last week in the Senate. It's improved from the previous bill he introduced last year. How so?
Yeah, that was certainly a great moment in that town hall, and I don't think that the Fox News host exactly expected that. But for I think a lot of folks across the country who've been doing organizing around Medicare for All, it was really not surprising. We're in this historic moment right now where Medicare for All enjoys a record amount of support. Consistently, about 70% of the public, including a majority of Democrats, Republicans, and independents, say that they support Medicare for All. And yeah, we got a big boost last week, as you mentioned, as Senator Bernie Sanders introduced Medicare for All back into the Senate, S 1129, and with some notable improvements, including most prominently the inclusion of long-term care, which I think has certainly been added as a result of sort of this grassroots movement and pressure and organizing that's been going on. And on top of that, what's also exciting is that almost every Democratic senator who's running for president right now is also co-sponsoring that Medicare for All bill.
Listeners, we've been talking with National Nurses United community organizer Max Cotterill about the nurses campaign to win Medicare for All and how you can get involved. Please take a moment and visit the site Max talked about, Medicare, the number 4, all.org, or go to nationalnursesunited.org and they can direct you as well. Max, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. You can find more information about these topics at nursetalksite.com or nationalnursesunited.org.
This podcast is powered by National Nurses United, the nation's largest union for registered nurses.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day 4,000 strikers and their supporters gathered for the March for Dignity and Respect in Laurel, Mississippi. Over 200 mostly black women members of the International Chemical Workers Union Local 882 had been on strike against Sanderson Farms chicken processing plant for 15 months. Trade unionists from as far away as Cincinnati, Memphis, and North Carolina came to march in support. Sanderson Farms had cleared $58 million in profit, but paid workers just $3 an hour. The women demanded a contract that included more control over assembly line speed, overtime pay, and insurance. They complained of desperately low wages, inhumane working conditions, and even the inability to use the bathroom when necessary. Workers were given only gloves and an apron once a month, and a file to sharpen their often dull and rusty scissors and knives. They often referred to the processing plant as the plantation, where sexual harassment was rampant. Women workers often found themselves given dangerous assignments or even fired if they didn't put up with sexual advances of their foreman. Workers maintained that strikebreakers from the community were desperately poor and threatened with violence if they quit by local Ku Klux Klansmen who worked as supervisors at the plant. Some were known to have been involved in the murder and or intimidation of civil rights workers in decades past. The plant had been organized in 1972, but was extraordinarily weak. Nonetheless, women strikers understood that the union still...
Oh! This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randy, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
This is a message
for leaders of the Democratic Party. For over 2 years, this president has broken the law.
And nothing happened.
You told us to wait for the Mueller investigation.
And when he showed obstruction of justice,
nothing happened.
When this president
took money from foreign governments
and blocked the release of his tax returns,
nothing happened.
And when his administration illegally refused to testify, nothing happened. Now you tell us to wait for the next election?
Really?
Really?
Really? This is why we volunteered,
raised money,
went door to door,
and voted in the last election. Our founding fathers expected you,
Congress, to hold a lawless president accountable.
And you're doing nothing. Nothing.
Nothing.
He broke his oath of office.
He's defying you. He's laughing at you. And he's getting away with it.
This is our democracy.
But Congress is part of the system, and the system is broken. We have to fix it.
Need to Impeach is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Nice. Very, very nice. I'm all about it. I'm all about it because the more this president gets a pass, the more disgusting his behavior is going to get. The more lawless he's going to be, the more we face things like using the Insurrection Act. The Insurrection is like an 1808 thing. The more that we see, the president's going to treat human beings like flotsam and jetsam. He's going to treat them as pawns in some great game and mobilize the military inside the United States, perhaps even suspend elections. I mean, it is 2019, everybody. If this man starts with the Insurrection Act, if this man starts with martial law, there is no election in 2020. I mean, what the hell are we waiting for? You know how long impeachment takes? It doesn't just happen overnight. Yes, you could take an impeachment vote overnight, but that's not going to persuade the American people of the righteousness or the justness of the need to impeach. You must start hearings. You must get documents. You must get the witnesses. And the only way to do it, the only way for us to drag people, look, maybe there'll be some brave people. Maybe Mueller will finally consent to testifying. Maybe Flynn will consent to testifying. Maybe Don McGahn will see his way clear to testify. I doubt it. I doubt it. This is crazy. This is off the hook. This is mind-blowingly bad. This is horrific. And we were all waiting for the court to order something, right? Well, that's why we started the show with Emmett Sullivan, the federal court judge, who ordered that the Flynn tapes be posted on a court website, a public court website, no later than May 31st. He wants all the unredacted portions of the Mueller report having to do with Flynn posted. He wants the voicemails posted. He wants the communications and the transcripts of the communications between the Trump campaign, the transition team, Flynn, etc., made public by May 31st. Now, if the Trump administration doesn't comply with the court order, there's your freaking constitutional crisis. There it is. And that's where we're at. That's where we are. Gary in Fort Lauderdale.
Hey, Randy.
Hey, could I just say thank you? Your wife sent me the most beautiful card. I got it. Oh,
is that Mother's Day?
Yes.
Oh boy, well that's nice.
It was beautiful.
I'll tell her that you thanked her.
Oh yeah.
Randy, so is the removal force to remove them and ship them to Palm Beach and Broward County? Is that the idea?
I think the removal force is to be on the border and start shooting people, because the president has already suggested that he wishes he could shoot them and that in other countries you can.
Can only imagine what's going to happen when that happens. It probably will. So anyway, about the point of doing this.
I mean, just think about this. The 2020 election is going to use footage of American troops rounding up immigrants and refugees in order to motivate his base?
Yeah, it'll do that.
Okay.
And they'll get a good laugh out of it by shipping them down here.
Well, I welcome them. I don't know how you...
I know you do, yeah.
I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm totally open to it. I mean, if I could help just this much... make somebody's life just a little bit better and give them a fair chance at doing well here, I'm going to do it. Like I said, I work in a Haitian neighborhood. There's a Haitian church across the street from me. There's a Jewish center, down the block. We are, we've had Cubans come, we've had Brazilians, we've had Haitians, we've had Venezuelans, we've had Guatemalans, come in a wave. New York is constantly receiving new waves of refugees. Like, you could always tell by the cab drivers.
Yeah.
1 year it's all Bangladeshis, then the next year you have all these Russian speakers, then the next year your cab drivers are all, from Kenya. I mean, you can see Senegal, you can see the waves come in. So I think we're fine. I think we'll do a great job. I think
so too.
I do.
Yeah, there's one more point though. You know the word NIMBY?
Not in my backyard, yeah.
Right. I think that's another psychological aspect of this. In other words, when people who are possibly on the fence see people that they might not want in their backyard, they might say, we got to stop these people from coming in. And they might support Trump.
Yeah, but look around you. We have all these brown people here already, so they will blend. That's number one, because we are a community of immigrants. There's no question. South Florida is a community of immigrants, which is why we all vote blue. Okay.
I think Caucasians are a minority in our counties.
Maybe, but it doesn't matter.
I don't care.
I will say this: the Trumpanzees literally live on Palm Beach. And if they start to see and they realize that their president has done this to them, I think they'll revolt too. But here's another plan. I think that they all need to stay on Trump properties. I think every one of these immigrants should be given a place to stay at Doral. They should be given a place to stay at Mar-a-Lago. You know what I mean? He's got all this real estate empty because it's you got Russians everywhere, right? So let them stay on Trump properties.
Maybe it's the new wave of sex slaves.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Bye, Randy.
Bye. Eileen in Philadelphia. That's another thing. We have tons of Vietnamese here. We have tons of Laotians here. Everybody gets along. Everybody's cool until you cross over onto Palm Beach where the billionaires live, and then they're all Trumpanzees because all they want is tax cuts. Eileen in Philly.
Yeah, I figured if you're not sending him anywhere, he would send it to sanctuary city.
You what?
Florida. I like the point he made that, maybe put it in their face. People would change their minds. I just wanted to call and tell you that I just found that so touching. You're like, I would take them in. I believe you. I 100% believe.
Oh yeah, I will.
That.
There's no question.
You're amazing. I love that. You're so kind. You're so informative, and I just appreciate you.
I just want everyone who's anti-abortion to understand that we have living, breathing children now that need homes. So let's see if the anti-abortion people just love the fetus and hate the child. Let's put my little theory to work.
They just don't understand. I've worked in a hospital for 30 years, and they don't understand. You give people access. Give them more access to abortion, and there will be less abortion because people will be more informed. They understand more. The more information, the more choice people have. I don't know why people don't get this. It's so...
Abortion in this country is very rare, okay? So, I mean, people don't do it on purpose. Most people that have abortions already have children. That's another dirty little secret about the facts about abortion. So all the facts about abortion are in the homework today, along with all these stories that we covered today. So, if you don't get the homework, just sign up. It's free. We'll send it to you every morning. If you don't want it, you could just unsubscribe. But it's a great, compilation of all these stories that are in there, and it's got facts about everything, and it's a good little utensil. Jerry in Baltimore.
Hey, Randy.
Hi,
Thanks
Jerry.
for taking my call.
Sure.
Isn't what you described with Trump a crime against humanity, or blatant neglect? And can't he be personally charged as well as any government personnel or official that obeys an illegal order held criminally responsible?
Only if he starts killing immigrants. If he actually mobilizes the military in that way and uses them as a removal force, and people end up getting shot and killed in this, with the use of the military to do then yeah, it would be a war crime.
Well, we've already had two immigrants die in the custody of
I think 4. I think 4 little kids have died so far.
The precedent, and my point is, the precedent has been set. Where's the ACLU to charge?
Oh, they're suing him. They've been there. The ACLU is doing a fabulous job of, holding him accountable. So,
for cash, for all of his money.
Oh, I see. Personally, no, you can't do it. Can't do it. But yeah, this is the situation we're in. So I just want people in South Florida to understand that in 2 weeks, we'll be gone for a week, and so this isn't going to happen till after we get back. But once we start seeing people land here, I just want everybody, we'll organize and we'll go to Dania. If you're in Fort Lauderdale, I'll go to Riviera Beach, which is, 10 minutes from here. And start opening up your house and understanding, that there are children that are going to need food, are going to need shelter, their moms are going to need food and shelter, and that the president, is using these people as pawns. Also, be very wary of this Insurrection Act thing. And, like I said, if Mueller testifies or whatever, I will Periscope it. I'm going to Costa Rica, you know that. I'm going to Central America anyway. Maybe I'll bring some people back. Stay tuned for the Randi Rhodes After Hours podcast featuring the one, the only Malcolm Nance. See you in a week, everybody.
To speak to Randy, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
Randi Rhodes, Air Force.
The rich aren't merely different from you and me. They're ridiculous. The uber rich, the billionaire barons of Wall Street who literally live above the real world and are clueless about the gross inequality their financial schemes are creating. Take Kenneth Griffin, a hedge fund tycoon who's the latest gold medal champion of conspicuous consumption. He just paid an obscene $238 million for a sprawling 24,000-square-foot New York City penthouse located 79 stories above street level at Central Park South. A strip nicknamed Billionaire's Row. His 3-floor mansion in the sky is the most expensive residential purchase in U.S. history, exceeding the excesses of robber barons in the Gilded Age. Adding to the overindulgence, he'll live there only occasionally, for he also has a $60 million penthouse in Miami, a $122 million mansion in London, and posh crash pads elsewhere. Griffin is the poster child for that disgraceful Trump GOP tax cut for the super rich, which they passed by claiming that beneficiaries like Ken would put their windfall into jobs and wage increases for the working class. Interestingly, his exclusive skyscraper residence replaces a modest 20-story building of affordable rent-controlled apartments where dozens of middle-class tenants lived. They were evicted by the corporate developers to provide opulent digs for a few billionaires. That ought to be illegal, but instead, a state law specifically empowers landlords to toss out middle-class and low-income tenants, demolish their apartments, and put up a swank new building. If you wonder where inequality and America's affordable housing crisis...
Buy a stinking podcast.